Look, it is the year of our Lord 2020, and the idea of producing a Hollywood musical is a hard sell, especially if you're trying to make it an event movie. And there are several reasons for this, which Lindsay Ellis will gladly elaborate on over on her channel. But I'm not too concerned with when and why the movie musical fails in the modern day, as much as when and why it succeeds.
Ladies and gents, this is the moment you've waited for.
In our endeavors to figure this out, we will be looking at 3 case studies that, by and large, work as movie musicals. Lydia Lloyd's Mamma Mia, Damien Chazelle's La La Land, and Michael Gracey's The Greatest Showman.
Greetings, foolish mortals.
Okay, now, I know we said we weren't going to discuss why movie musicals fail in this video, but it's important for context, and I'm head bitch in charge around here, so listen up. First, let's discuss diegesis in the world of the film. When we say the world of the film, we refer to this fictional world in which the story takes place. The world of Captain America: The First Avenger is not our world. Hate to break it to you, but Steve Rogers isn't real. However, Captain America: First Avenger's world is the world of Iron Man. You see what I'm getting at? Diegesis refers to elements of the story which exist in that world. For example, the score, by and large, is non-diegetic. Movie musicals are hard to execute well, especially in today's climate. Mainstream movies tend towards a realistic lens that doesn't even begin to jive with the more fantastical of musicals. And by that, I don't mean musicals equal fantasy, although that is sometimes the case. Musicals run the gamut of genres and settings, and a large chunk, like in other mediums, take place in our reality. Aside from, the singing. So what I mean when I say fantastical is more along the lines of style, how it's presented. Fantasy elements like magic or dragons are diegetic. However, fantastical elements, in the sense that I'm using it, like musical numbers, non-diegetic. Unless the musical explains the songs diegetically, like in Pitch Perfect where there's a singing group and most of the songs they sing are for performance, the songs and choreography belong not to the realm of story, but to the realm of style, as they are how the composer, the writer, the director, and the designers choose to present the story. And because people don't, generally, burst into song and dance to convey plot and or emotion in reality, musicals don't really fit into a realistic style, which tends to treat the camera, and by extension the screen, as a window into the world of the film. For example of how this differs on stage, let's take a look at the 2016 revival of William Finn's falsettos. I'm gonna try and keep this short. I could do an entire video about the show. So this is a show that starts like this, and ends with one of the being hospitalized and dying from a sickness that, while not known diegetically, the audience very easily recognizes as AIDS. In the 2016 revival, for the first 3/4 of the show, the set is constructed out of the cube, a collection of dark gray blocks that build sets and furniture, but can fit together into a large cube in the center of the stage. A concept throughout the show, but given more spotlight in the second half, is the idea of falsetto land. In fact, before the show was constructed as a single 2-act, the second act existed as a singular 1-act show known as Falsetto Land. The idea is that of gliding through life, just going with the flow. This is even called attention to when Marvin interrupts the song Welcome to Falsetto Land at the beginning of Act 2 with a song talking about how it's time to grow up. The building block nature of the set reflects this playful way of life, and this all stops when Wizard is admitted to a very real hospital. The realistic set lasts until Wizard dies, and the family is still grieving and worried that Marvin is probably also infected. They try to go on living and try not to think about it. They return to Falsetto Land and the cube returns to the stage. You can't do stuff like that in a film. Whew, that was depressing. Let's look at some cats. Oh my god. Look at that cat. Look at that kitty. Look at the kitty. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, so as we've discussed, movies these days are generally shot and edited like a literal depiction of what is happening in the story. However, when you have diegetic characters interacting with non-diegetic elements like a musical number, you have to get creative, either by finding a way to blend that in with the literal framing surrounding the musical numbers, or by banning the literal lens altogether.
Are you blind when you're born?
But mainstream movies don't do that anymore. In the 1959 article, The New Hollywood, the Myth and the Anti-Myth, Robert Brustein writes, "The celluloid is losing its sharpness of focus and assuming the murkier tones hitherto associated with European realism. The costumes apparently acquired no longer from a mucker, but from the surplus stores of the Salvation Army, hang on the actors as dashingly as skivvies on a scarecrow. The glamour queen is unpinning her hair, exposing her haughty skin and puffy eyes, and reverting to the untutored accents of her original speech. Goodbye, my loves, until we meet again." Oi, you cunt! Where's my beer? It was, coincidentally or not, around this time that the era of the big Hollywood musical of the 20th century came to a close. But nowadays, you have this pervasive literal framing. You can even see this a bit with the depiction of superheroes and how they've changed over the years. Hell, you even have stuff like What We Do in the Shadows, which you should totally watch, that frame themselves as documentaries, a camera crew following around some people as they live out their lives. Even though they're following vampires. But again, people don't do musical numbers in real life, so when you do that in a movie, it can be jarring and sudden snap from reality. So, how do you do it? Act 1. Setting. One big connective thread between my three examples is setting and how it works for the film's benefit. Scene 1. Hollywood. La La Land is set in Hollywood, but not regular Hollywood, but Hollywood! The movie even opens with a bombastic opening number explicitly about how fantasized the pop culture idea of Hollywood has become, with an entire freeway's worth of LA traffic singing about its hypnotic lure. In their book, The Hollywood Sign, The Fantasy and Reality of American Icon, Leo Braudy writes, "To moviegoers and so many others, the sign represents the earthly home of that otherwise ethereal world, fame, stardom, and celebrity. The goal of American and worldwide aspirations, to be in the limelight, to be, like the Hollywood sign itself, instantly recognizable." Hollywood has a long history of trying to exude an air of paradise. In its early history, city ordinances banned selling of liquor, public drunkenness, pool rooms, shooting galleries, bowling alleys, slaughterhouses, glue factories, soap factories, gasworks, tanneries, camping and traveling outfits, messing with the trees, and littering in the waterways. The city was very purposely trying to create an Eden-like paradise, and several prominent artists set up shops in the feudal Hollywood, like Paul Delancre and L. Frank Baum. Because the movie is already elevating itself to this level of fantastical and dreamlike by invoking the pop culture idea of Hollywood, the musical numbers don't come as much of a shock. The movie is also interesting in that it both invokes the fantastical idea of Hollywood and actively dissects it. The movie is self-aware of these larger-than-life myths about Hollywood. Hollywood glamour is a theme of the film. The company from Another Day of Sun may have come here to make it big, but instead they're all stuck in traffic singing about how they've yet to make it big. Emma Stone's character Mia works at a movie studio in the coffee shop, and when she later opens her one-woman show, barely anyone comes to see it. The Hollywood myth, as Brustein calls it, is just that, a myth. Scene 2. Greece. Mamma Mia is also set in a highly fantasized locale, the Greek islands. It's paradise, baby, not a care in the world. However, the amount of literature written about the fantasy of Greece is far less than that written of Hollywood, which was already pretty thin on the ground, so sorry in advance. Again, the setting helps the style. The island is so idyllic, it makes it easier to slip some numbers in here and there since it's already fairly removed from what the audience experiences on the daily. The movie makes a point to show off the island of Scapolos and the sea, wide sweeping shots of the island and sea, the sun so bright in almost every scene it's damn near blinding. Yeah, I know. The sea is even in the backdrop of all of the different posters for the movie, with the theatrical release poster also showcasing that it is a party! You get so lost in the fun in the sun, your brain turns off, and you just don't get that dissonance when they break into song. Scene 3. The circus. The circus is already so breathtaking and odd and somewhat magical that it creates this fantastical style for the rest of the movie that the musical numbers can work in. I mean, the movie's already about weirdos and showbiz, and they sing. Fuck it. To note is that the singing in the show is only ever done by people involved in P.T.'s productions. P.T., his family, his acts. And we're going to come back to this because, honestly, that tracks. Theater kids are weird. It's me. I'm theater kids. Yeah, you already knew that. Act 2, Rouge. Scene 1, Glamour. La La Land is a callback to the heyday of the Hollywood musical. Gosling's character Sebastian being into jazz is not a spin of the wheel. Jazz takes us back to the early mid-20th century, the 20s through the 50s. This is by no accident also the age of Hollywood glamour in the movie musical. We can see this love for the studio system era with the ending dance sequence, a different ending. Look at these two shots. They're both very Brechtian in an already very meta scene. My mother and brother still don't get the ending. But look at this equipment. Look at the director. This isn't a modern film set. This is a caricature, a literal caricature of a classic movie set. As the script puts it, this is in fact an LA that doesn't exist.
Or if you look closely, when me and Sebastian sit down to watch their home movies, the home movies are shot on 16mm film. I initially wrote that line as on film, however the entire movie is actually shot on film, just 35mm. It's also shot in the 2.66 aspect ratio known as CinemaScope, which enjoyed the same popularity peak as the Hollywood musical.
Film also makes references to some of the greats of the era. Staying with a different ending, we find this reference to An American Paris. We also see several references to the works of Jacques Demy, specifically with Another Day of Sun. There's also the fact that this is a movie about Hollywood. In their book, The Hollywood Musical, Jane Feuer makes the point that a lot of movies from the heyday of the Hollywood musical were about showbiz. During the talkie boom from 1929 to 1933, a large percentage of film musicals took as their subjects the world of entertainment. Broadway, vaudeville, the Ziegfeld Follies, burlesque, nightclubs, the circus, Tin Pan Alley, and to a lesser extent, mass entertainment media in the form of radio or the movies themselves. Putting on a show was a formula that made breaking into song and dance plausible, and thereby justifying the inclusion of musical numbers in the film. It's essentially the oldest trick in the book, a tried and true method. Can you imagine if that's like attracted into real life though? Like one of the theater kids is being a little bitch, so the main kid is like, okay girls, candy store, and a 1, and a 2. But La La Land also has the benefit of invoking nostalgia of classic movie musicals, like An American Paris and West Side Story. People don't get dissonance watching old movie musicals, so invoking and calling back to those allows Chazelle to essentially harness their power. Oh, this works for The Greatest Showman too. Feuer included the circus in the list for popular settings for early musicals. Like I mentioned earlier, the circus is already a place of larger-than-life showbiz extravaganza, so primes to the audience for the music. Well, we all saw this coming. People like Mamma Mia because they like drinking wine and singing ABBA songs. Good for her! Like, Mamma Mia is the farthest thing from Oscar bait you can think of. You're not meant to, think during Mamma Mia. You're just supposed to enjoy it. I, however, am a rebel and refuse to play by your rules. Thinking about it though, Mamma Mia being a jukebox musical provides just enough of a plausible reason so you can let it pass. Like, I know these songs, so it makes sense that they know them too. Act 3. Tone.
Just because God blessed you with Barbies, a backyard with a pony, a boyfriend named Jacob, and an unwanted pregnancy your father paid to terminate so that you could go to college and major in being a basic bitch doesn't make you a woman. Oh, just a second. All right, Mom, talk to you later. Bye. Do note, none of this should be treated as the special sauce, as it were. Simply having the movie be about showbiz or set in a vacation rental isn't going to strip away all of your audience's plot armor. So what can we learn from the likes of La La Land that make it work so well where, say, Phantom of the Opera did not? Well, however, we need to consider tone and style. Also likely inspired by nostalgia for the days of Judy Garland, the tone of La La Land is very light and airy. There are some emotional low points in the film, but the overall feel of the movie is as dreamlike and plastic as the pop culture idea of Hollywood itself. Braudy says, the physical Hollywood existed as a place with legally determined boundaries, but the name Hollywood had become an abstraction, a metonym that seemed to refer to everything about the movies except for the town that supposedly gave them birth. Hollywood as a brand had become international. This tone, which is also shared by Mamma Mia and The Greatest Showman, helps the audience slip into having a good time. Compare and contrast this to, say, Tom Hooper's Les Miserables, which is trying to be both this dark and gritty war drama about the dirges of society and, well, Shonenberg Cameron in all Les Miserables. Like, people are singing to cheap seats. You're not going to mingle that into a realistic tone. So stop trying. Full disclosure, whilst writing this video, I thought I was going to dig into The Greatest Showman and find some evidence or inkling that the filmmaker or the studio was kind of, you know, seeing Hamilton over there, being a big phenomenon, this blockbuster musical biopic, and wanted some of that. But for once, it seems to be a bit more genuine than that. In 2009, Hugh Jackman hosted the Academy Awards with arguably the best opening to any Oscars ever. And according to Vulture, it was this that inspired not only The Greatest Showman as a vehicle for Jackman, but also led to starring in Tom Hooper's Les Miserables. You win some, you lose some. And for the mathematicians at home, those numbers do not lie. TGS was in some form of production for 8 years. So while Hamilton might have bolstered the studio's confidence in the project during filming and post, especially as we got into the 2010s and the early 2000s musical boom died out, it was not the musical that inspired it. No, I think it's time we take a trip to our final stop on this world tour of musical settings. Act 4, Moulin Rouge in Style. In 2001, Baz Luhrmann released the third film in his Red Curtain trilogy, Moulin Rouge, a jukebox musical love story set in the titular famous cabaret, which made over $180 million in box office sales and won a fair number of awards, including 2 Oscars and 3 Golden Globes. Also, just another little confession. When I first started drafting this video, I realized that Moulin Rouge could also be a great case study, but I hadn't seen it. Sorry. But my research for the other 3 led me back here. And I have seen it now, don't worry. So, the songs. Like I said before, Moulin Rouge is a jukebox musical, meaning instead of an original score, all the numbers except Come What May are established, well-known songs from real-world artists. And Come What May, while written for the Red Curtain trilogy, was not originally written for Moulin Rouge. Moulin Rouge and Mamma Mia are both jukebox musicals, but Moulin doesn't limit itself to just one artist, instead including songs from Elton John, Marilyn Monroe, Madonna, and more. Now, there's this interesting thing about jukebox musicals. By design, they can't do what is basically the tentpole of the modern musical. The general idea of a musical is the actor seeing the plot to you. And for a large portion of musicals, that's not wrong. But if you're working with established songs and you don't want to change the lyrics all that much, you can't really use that to convey plot. But you can use them for characterization and emotion, and that's what Moulin Rouge does, as does Mamma Mia. Moulin Rouge does remix and transpose the songs, but they don't really add in plot. The numbers, if anything, work more for characterization than they do the plot. This is because the songs are largely self-contained. Contrast this to more traditional musical numbers, which are largely not self-contained. For example, try What You Want from Legally Blonde, in which, she decided to follow Warner to Harvard, convinced her friends and family to support her, studied for and aced her LSATs, and then breaks into the admissions office and convinces the admissions team to let her in. Or What Do You Do with a BA in English? It Sucks to Be Me from Avenue Q, which does mostly focus on characterization and setting up our main characters, but also brings in the plot with Princeton securing an apartment on the street within the song. So, where am I going with this? Well, numbers being limited to only expressing characterization and not plot doesn't have to be limited to jukebox musicals. Benjamin Pasek, composers and lyricists who worked on Greatest Showman and La La Land, wrote all original songs for the film, but I think they took to heart this idea of self-contained songs. These songs are more akin to the songs we hear in our own lives. While pop songs can sometimes have a plot, anything substantial outside the video is an outlier. Looking at the soundtrack album for Showman, we see it reached #1 in the US, UK, and abroad, and was Billboard's #4 for 2018 and 14 for 2019. 2018 also saw the release of The Greatest Showman Reimagined, an album containing covers and remixes of the songs from the movie done by popular musicians. This peaked at #3 on the Billboard 200. La La Land doesn't get into this as much, but it does hew closer to this than traditional plot songs. The songs didn't get the radio circulation like with Showman. Yeah, you're not going to be hearing City of Stars at the supermarket anytime soon. However, the songs do strive to give more the feeling of something you could hear on the radio, as if they could be given the reimagined album treatment. And it worked. The soundtrack hit #2 on Billboard here in the US and #1 on foreign charts. The songs are fun, they're likable. This helps people kind of lose themselves in the songs and not notice them as much. Another holdover from Moulin Rouge's style. Moulin Rouge is high melodrama, massively camp. Baz Luhrmann is a very stylized filmmaker, a modern auteur. As Anna Kristel Gamboa writes in the Auteurism of Baz Luhrmann, the camera is commonly seen just as a window to present what is happening in the film. This goes back to what I was saying about films being made in that realistic lens. Gamboa goes on. However, creative filmmakers can achieve much more than just presenting the events of the film with camera and editing. Here, Gamboa is saying filmmakers like Luhrmann go beyond just showing the story to the viewer directly, instead present it, gussy it up with symbolism and non-diegetic elements. In basic film, symbolism is relegated to diegetic items, a prop or a costume trend, a color. But more creative filmmakers can just put symbolism everywhere, all over the place. You can have whole scenes that are non-diegetic, just completely symbolic. Like this sequence during Zittler's rap. I am near certain that when Baz Luhrmann and his team put that sequence together, they were not intending to imply that Zittler has teleportation powers or Deadpool-esque self-awareness, or that he is that nimble. No, it's meant to express the tone of the Moulin Rouge nightclub, similar to our friend A Different Ending. Did you forget about that? Me too. Like I said before, this sequence is meant to be serious, not meant to be literal. It is a dream sequence. One would think dream sequences would lend themselves to being more surreal or heightened, because dreams be like that sometimes, honestly. Especially if you go to bed too soon after. Gamboa argues that Luhrmann has a formalist style. Formalism in film is how the aesthetics go attention to itself. They're the opposite of the realists. Since the latter use the camera as a window to the real world, film transforms these realities by communicating them in creative ways. The formalists can convey them through technological devices. The basic idea is that formalists want you to be aware at all times that what you're watching is a film. It's not reality, it's a sensationalized work of fiction. But it's not jarring, like if there's a very obvious boom in the shot, because it also strikes a balance with making it immersive, allowing you to really get into it. A lot of music videos play around in this style with a stylized presentation and fudged diegesis. For instance, in Pitch Spectacular Spectacular, there's a whooshing sound effect accompanying them turning their heads to look at each other. Now, last I checked, yeah, that doesn't happen in reality. But it's fun, it's campy, it's formalist. Think of like a dry clean. Cross-dressing or having someone of a certain gender play a character of another gender isn't uncommon in theater, but where it leaves your run-of-the-mill cross-dressing actor and enters the realm of drag, then the performance calls attention to itself. Baz Luhrmann is the drag queen equivalent of filmmaker, is what I'm saying. When you have a gender-blind casting, the audience isn't really supposed to think about it.
Like, you're not supposed to place stock in the fact that the nurse in Romeo and Juliet is played by a male actor. In a similar vein, when women have big hair, big tits, and lots of makeup, or men have chiseled abs and a goatee, you're not supposed to care, unless you're into that. But with drag, the style of performance calls attention to these elements. The thing about Dolly Parton that makes her a drag icon, where, say, Shania Twain or Reba aren't, is that Dolly made the Dolly look part of her brand. The hair, the makeup, the boobs. She has gone on record to say she modeled herself after streetwalking sex workers. Now, don't get me wrong, Reba does have a very distinctive look, and drag queens utilize that when impersonating her, but it's less, this is what Reba looks like, and more, this is what Reba looks like. Let's look at another day's in again. First, notice that this entire sequence is one long take. There is not a visible cut anywhere during this number. Now, side note, there are actually 3 hidden cuts. Good luck finding them, though. The first visible cut of the film is 6 minutes in. Now, this is a technique that is repeated often throughout the film during the musical numbers, where visible cuts during non-diegetic numbers are only ever done during a musical interlude, never during lyrics, and not even during the dance sequence in A Lovely Night. That's all one take as well. There are cuts in Planetarium, but that number is more of a score versus like a musical number, and it's very obviously a dream sequence instead of a literal depiction of their date. At least I don't think that's how Griffith works. Let me know in the comments. But cutting back to Another Day of Sun, listen in for a sec.
I often have to cut into the brain in certain principles.
The radios of the car are all playing different songs when La Gasp, the intro for the song, comes in almost as if it's another song on the radio. This subtle transition to the number, I think, helps the audience slip into it. Damien Chazelle, the director, said, in order for people to accept that it's a musical, you have to announce it confidently at the beginning. Hence the enormous opening number that took 2 days to film. You gotta establish your musical cred. The Greatest Showman and Mamma Mia also do this thing where the conversations lead into the numbers as emotions ramp up. It's an old theater trick. In fact, Mamma Mia often just cuts the intros and just gets right into the song.
Donna, listen to me. This is about us.
I don't want to talk about things we've gone through, though it's hurting me. Now it's history.
You can really tell if you contrast this against the soundtrack version.
I don't want to talk.
So, what can we take away from all of that? In the end, the idea behind what made these 3 or 4 movies work is that they don't take themselves too seriously or try to wedge themselves into a hole they're not meant for. They know they're not going to be able to produce a functioning movie musical the way you would produce a war drama or a superhero movie, and they don't try. But the fact of the matter is, these creative directors are hard to come by in modern Hollywood, and studios are a bit reluctant to give projects to them. The superhero-style film, it works, and studios like to stick with what they know work. And with musicals, by and large, they don't. Now, of course, this is a catch-22 that could be solved very easily if studios stopped being such whiny little bitch babies and took a chance every now and then. But when you're talking mainstream studios wanting to make mainstream films with tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of budget, they're going to want to make sure they get their money back. So they bank on safe movies, produce them the ways that worked for years, and prefer not to take risks. And this has hurt them. Not only because we don't get big functioning movie musicals much these days, as much as that's what bugs me. But when the original heyday of the Hollywood musical was ending, it almost took entire studios along with it, especially since the Road Show was on its way out at the same time, and studios were clinging to both of them to get butts in seats. So, who knows? Maybe Cats 2019 will scare big studios off from making musicals for a while, formalist or realist. Or maybe the Pro Shot of Hamilton will get those a bigger market share. Or maybe studios will finally stop giving musicals to realists and give them to the formalists. Who knows? All I know is that with musicals, as with life, you should never take things too seriously. Stay spooky.